We're getting all the insight here at Flame 2018. With me now is Frank Konertz, who is the head of LNG Analytics at Platts. Thank you very much for joining us, Frank.
My pleasure.
You're here to talk, first of all, looking at your part of the conference and your title here, forecasting the markets in gas and LNG. That's your particular area here, and how do you see them?
Changing, I reckon, which is good, which keeps it interesting, and which is, I think, probably good for all in the market. I think a lot of the changes that we see at the moment, and we saw them coming, right? We foresaw all this supply capacity additions, and I think there was a strong consensus in the market of demand growing very strongly now, and also over the next couple of years, very much driven by growth in Asia, so China, but also Southeast Asia. One of the key questions is kind of what are the implications on trade flows, right? What does that mean for prices, and probably most interestingly, what does it mean for spreads? And I think we can talk about geographical spreads as well as seasonal spreads. We expect that there will be quite a lot of changes, and probably there's more uncertainty on the price implications rather than on some of the fundamentals, which I think we have more certainty around forecasting.
Now, does that make it a very exciting time or quite a concerning time?
Well, probably more the former.
Okay.
It's very, very exciting. We hope to be able to take some of the concern out and hopefully kind of providing some thoughts around what would be the concerns if you kind of don't look forward, if you don't try to understand what are the implications, right? It's always difficult to forecast, so there's risk around it. The key is in trying to think of what could happen, what are different paths that could happen, and what would the implications be on each of those paths. So let's take the concern out of the excitement.
Well, okay, when people come to you and they are looking at the markets, they are looking to see where the smart money is going, what are the concerns that they have then?
A lot of the concerns really are around, probably the biggest thing probably is, everybody said there's a glut, where's the glut? It's not coming, right? So that's one of the key concerns, like how much, where's the risk on some of those fundamental forecasts that we and others provide. I think that's one of the key concerns. The second concern, again, will be on pricing. What are regional spreads going to be? How will a price benchmark like JKM fare compared to European prices or to Henry Hub? Will the spreads increase? Will they decrease? We talk a lot about conversions, and today in the conference we talked a lot about conversions already. I think there's a general consensus or expectation that yes, there will be conversions, but what does it mean? I think it doesn't necessarily mean that prices will level out. There is a driver, there's a reason why we probably will see premiums in some market, and that reason is if we simply have a demand growth outpacing supply growth in some of those regions. So yes, there is a reason for higher regional spreads. And equally on seasonal spreads, we have a lot of uncertainty around when exactly will new supply come on stream. Yes, China will grow. How much of that growth is going to be weighed to winter versus summer? What about some of the kind of demand losses that we see partly in Latin America, but also in the Middle East? How will those impact the seasonal balance of LNG? And how will that impact seasonal fluctuations in the market? So I think there's more, again, I wouldn't necessarily call it concern, but there's question marks, there's uncertainty around exactly that.
Well, does that mean then the smart money goes towards storage?
It may well go into storage. I'm not going to judge whether the Chinese money is smart money or not, but yes, there clearly is a scenario that we're forecasting where there will be a need for more storage capacity. And again, China is one of the countries that will build more storage capacity now.
Let's talk politically. How do you see that playing into all the different markets? Because there's been a lot about that talked about, even so far here at Flame.
It will, and it is, and I reckon in that perspective, Flame is coming at a good time. We just a couple of days ago we had the U.S. sanctions on Iran being renewed. So there are major global drivers on political changes, and I think the Iran sanction is a good example. It will likely be able to impact gas and LNG via the impact of oil prices on gas and LNG market, but it also may impact some of the market players in how they want to position themselves,
right.
keeping political situations closely in mind. So I think there's both a fundamental and a price perspective. There's more regional political changes that I think will be interesting as well. If you take just the recent elections in Malaysia, for example, right? There's going to be change in how the government will likely see the market liberalization or regulation. So clearly, we will need to continue to look at political developments, assess the risk, but also the potential it will bring with it.
You didn't mention any politics between the US and Russia, and we've heard here at Flame that you have Russian companies, because of sanctions, now trying to develop more and more technology inside Russia to cope with that.
Yeah, it's a good point. I didn't mention it. Just the Iran was kind of more topical, but clearly yes, the US, Russia, or overall questions around Russia clearly will be pivotal. It will be especially pivotal for the European market, and I think we see kind of changes in how, for example, Nord Stream is being discussed in the political media in Germany and overall in Europe. So yes, clearly there's uncertainty around it, most definitely so.
Yeah, and do you think you're talking there about Germany? Well, let's just widen it out to Western Europe. We were hearing from Russian Novatek earlier that they feel that there's sort of this idea that there's good gas and bad gas, and that sort of plays into a public perception of where the gas comes from. I mean, do you think there is that sort of feeling from the public still as well?
That's extremely difficult. That's extremely difficult to judge. Again, we tend to take a very kind of market-driven approach, right? So our perspective is much more on is the gas economical? Will it flow? From that perspective, I'm reluctant to make a gut feeling kind of judgment call on this.
Okay.
I think from a European perspective, there clearly will be the need for more imports. There are fundamental drivers, whether that will be Russian gas, Caspian gas, North African gas, or LNG. And most likely, yes, politics will and could play a role in that.
Talk to me about the actual mix that you see and the percentage of gas within the energy mix for Europe.
So we expect gas will continue to play a strong role in Europe, and I think from kind of where demand drivers will be, there's quite a facet on it, and I'd like to take it not only looking at Europe but on a global level, and kind of including LNG in the perspective. We have markets where gas and LNG will simply be needed to drive economic growth. Tapping markets that have no access to gas or potentially have no electricity access, so gas being used to drive that. Equally, we have markets where gas and LNG can be used as a backup option for renewables, which is clearly a very strong growth driver. And one other area, quite topical, is the maritime sector. So LNG and gas clearly can play a major role in that. Interestingly, by 2030, we forecast that bunkering, if bunkering were a country, we think it could be the second biggest growth market in the world for LNG. So that's big changes again. Let's
fast forward, say 2-3 years. You pick the time scale. What do you think we'll be talking about 3 years from now?
In 3 years, we'll talk a lot about renewables. We'll talk about what role gas will play. We'll talk a lot on the LNG side more specifically. I think we'll talk a lot about flexibility on the shipping side, but also on the usage side. We'll talk probably a lot more around downstream markets. So enabling the LNG and the gas to get to the market, where how can countries, market players, consortia enable the access. So I think we're drilling deeper, and we're looking a little bit outside of gas and into the power market.
I look forward to talking to you about that, Frank.
In 3 years?
In 3 years, yeah. For the moment, thank you very much. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.